Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm your host, Alec MacDonald. Heavy rare earth materials are found in almost everything you turn on and off, including the device you are using to watch this, MRI machines, and key defense technology. While not necessarily rare in abundance, they are very difficult to extract in pure form, and 99% of the industry is within China. And now, following recent export curbs by China as part of the ongoing trade war, these critical supply chains are at risk. Today, to discuss rare earth materials and their supply chains, we're joined by Gracelin Baskaran, the director of the Critical Mineral Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gracelin Baskaran, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
To start off with, could you provide a quick introduction to these rare earth materials for people who may just be hearing about these for the first time?
Rare earth minerals are actually a group of 17 minerals, and they're a bit of a misnomer because they're not actually rare, they're everywhere. They're often found in small quantities and they can be difficult to extract. Now, the restrictions from China this week are actually on heavy rare earths, and there's a reason that we are particularly vulnerable for those. And that is that China holds almost pretty much 100% separation capacity of heavy rare earths. Because when I take rare earths out of the ground, before I can use them, they have to undergo separation and processing. The reality is that for light rare earths, there's some capacity outside of the US with some facilities, small facilities in Malaysia and Estonia. But with heavy rare earths, China was previously processing and separating about 99.5% of heavy rare earths, and there was a small facility in Vietnam. However, that's gone offline for tax reasons. So China now holds this dominance, not a comparative advantage, but an absolute advantage. And this is a really big problem for us because with these rare earth export restrictions means that we can't actually get access to them until China figures out a licensing system. And rare earths, for your reference, are used in many civilian and military use. So, for example, rare earths are used in defense technologies like fighter jets, warships, submarines, missiles, drones, satellites, lasers, tanks. But they're also in a lot of civilian uses. They're in your MRI and PET scanners at the hospital. They're in electric vehicle motors. So we expect to see challenges with the automotive industry. They're in your phones. They're in semiconductors. So there's this material where there's a concentration in China, but that are in pretty much every part of our economy.
Focusing on defense for a moment, could you spell out the severity of the risk to the U.S. defense industry supply chains?
There's a couple of reasons that our defense industry is really vulnerable. Not only did China roll out these export restrictions, but they also put 16 US companies on an export control list. Of these 16 companies, 15 of them are in the defense and aerospace industry. And it means that they are no longer able to access these dual use materials. So even when China rolls out its export licensing system, which I will explain in a moment, it means that these A&D firms are not going to be able to access rare earths, which is a really big predicament given, again, these materials are important for manufacturing. The difficulty with this licensing system, there's a few things. First, we don't expect it to be transparent. Two, there's going to be a delay because there's a pause in exports because it takes time for China to roll out a system to determine who gets a license, how much do they get to license, what is the traceability mechanisms they're going to put in terms of third party shipments, right, potentially going through another country. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is obviously the fact that regardless, our defense industry is going to be crippled. So these are some of the challenges that we need to roll out with the new licensing system, and we don't know what that's going to look like yet.
A bit more of a geopolitical question, but is China intentionally withholding these licenses?
It's hard to tell. Licensing systems inherently take time because you remember that these restrictions were retaliatory. These were not the first step, right? They were retaliatory to tariff. It's part of a longer pattern from Beijing. We saw in December 2024, 5 months ago, they rolled out a set of critical mineral export restrictions. And for the first time, they were targeted explicitly at the United States. But these were in retaliation to President Biden's semiconductor export restrictions. Now, this time they were retaliatory to tariffs. It's very possible that, I mean, we expect to see a negotiation at some point, because, quite frankly, the US does not have these separation capabilities. They are being built, but they will take time. So it's probably twofold. I mean, it is that a licensing system, which was done in retaliation, will take time to develop, but it is also likely that we will see minerals, rare earths, but minerals more broadly, feature in negotiations.
So why has there not been a diversification of the supply chain, especially considering that the US defense industry has pivoted most of their equipment to the Asia Pacific region, preparing for a potential war with China, where China is the nation that holds these key rare earth materials?
So I want to bring you back to the origins of some of these challenges that we're facing, which was actually in 2010. It was 15 years ago when China cut off Japan off of rare earth exports over a dispute regarding a fishing trawler. And then eventually exports were resumed. But that was like the first time that we were like, oh, rare earths and minerals more broadly can be weaponized. It really, the US really didn't do anything for a while. We kind of fell asleep at the wheel there. So 2017, President Trump issued the first executive order on critical minerals, noting that we were highly reliant on adversaries. Then we had the COVID pandemic, which kind of steered attention away. And then 2021, President Biden issued the next executive order, very similar to President Trump's executive order, noting we're highly reliant on adversaries. But it was really after the pandemic when the US actually started spending what's now about $438 billion on building these separation facilities here at home. The thing you have to remember, mining more than any other industry, I think, is a long-term effort. It takes a long time to build a mine. In the US, S&P Global has estimated that it takes 29 years. But building a processing facility is also very complicated. And it's more true for rare earths than for a copper smelter, for example. And that is because rare earth separation facilities are highly technically complex. And in December 2023, about a year and a half ago, China actually banned the export of rare earth separation technology. And there was this wake up moment for the world outside of China, not just the United States, that there were parts of that separation that we never learned how to do.
The rare earth industry is one that is seen as labor intensive mining and not environmentally friendly. So, what is being done to either correct these preconceptions or improve the environmental impact of this industry? Are these going to be hurdles to moving the industry, especially with the labor force, moving the industry towards the United States?
On the question about the workforce, there's 2 points here. The first is mining is not a sexy industry, and very few kids, when they grow up, want to be a farmer or a miner, which is why we have a real shortage of farmers and people in the mining industry, right? It's much cooler to be an astronaut. So there is a fundamental need with the mining industry to rebrand because mining is not blue collar primarily anymore. Most mines, mining was once a wheelbarrow and an axe industry. If you've gone to a mine anytime, whether it's in Africa or Latin America or America, it is basically what looks like a NASA control room, right? It is AI, it is very machine learning oriented. And what we need now is no longer the person to place the bomb in the rock blaster to go place that. We actually need an engineer. So it's really shifted from maybe what was once a more blue collar, low skill industry to one really driven by engineers and AI. Now, when it comes to environmental challenges, again, rare earths in particular, separation not environmentally friendly. And that's why there's something called NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard, and it is a proper movement. Right. And it's something that we've had to contend with for years, not just in the US, but broadly, which is I don't want these environmentally polluting processes anywhere near me. And frankly, this was one of the reasons we were happy for it to happen in China. There is a push. There is certainly a lot of research and development going into how we can do it cleaner, how we can improve recycling, right? Because the more we can recycle, the less primary material I need. But these are all relatively nascent areas of work, and part of that is because we haven't done this for a long time. So R&D and innovation is a very important role to play, but for rare earths is still at a much earlier stage than other commodities.
In the incidents of open conflict, it seems like the US defense industry would not have a resilient supply chain to continue building more tanks, more fighters, more naval vessels as there is attrition in the battlefield. Do they have a backup plan to provide for this supply chain resiliency?
The US defense industrial base is already on the back foot. CSIS put out a report, my colleague Seth Jones, who's the president of our Defense and Security Department last year, where he noted that China is acquiring and manufacturing weapons at a rate of 5 to 6 times what the US is right now. China, he notes, is operating at a wartime posture and the US at a peacetime posture. Now, the US defense industrial base is not at a place where it has the surge capabilities to shore up these capabilities rapidly in the instance of active conflict. Now, you add in the fact that a lot of the strategic materials that I need for conflict, right? Rare earth, antimony, which was banned last year, tungsten, which was banned earlier this year, are things that China is actively stockpiling. And that prevents us from being able to get the materials we need to respond and shore up our capabilities. So there was a defense strategy released in December 2024, just 5 months ago here in the US from the Pentagon, and they explicitly noted they want to, prioritize the mine to magnet supply chain for rare earths. And again, without the materials, we're not going to be able to build the capabilities, and we're already behind for capabilities, which is really concerning.
So, aside from the defense industry, what other industries are we looking at that could be impacted by these export curbs?
A whole range of civilian sectors are at risk. So automotive manufacturing. Automotive executives have already expressed their concern because we're building a relatively less profitable compared to China electric vehicle sector, and we need rare earths for those permanent magnets in those motors, right? So easy example where supply chain disruption, when you have a limited supply of a material that is both needed for defense and civilian use, defense end uses will generally take priority, especially if there's potential conflict. So in that instance, and the fact that already, I have a friend who is a trader who is saying, they went to go put in a order for rare earths. They couldn't get one from an Asian stockpile at 20x the price. They ended up getting one from another stockpile at 15x the price. Then we think about things like medical technology, semiconductors. Semiconductors are crucial for both their dual use, right, for military and civil use. Another example of where restrictions will be consequential. So we do see it to be in a range of strategic technology industries.
Are there any short-term solutions, especially ones that might be provided by a European nation who might be looking at the same situation and wanting to increase defense industry capabilities, but also not rely on China for their rare earth materials?
Heavy rare earth separation is being done in China. So the question is, we can try to accelerate the development of our capabilities, but it's going to be a little bit. And then the second option is to negotiate, right? These were done in retaliation to tariffs. So ultimately, the question is, how long do we, basically strategic materials have come into the trade war. And so ultimately, it will be a question of if and when we negotiate.
Gracelin, thank you very much for joining us today. This has been a very insightful conversation.
Such a pleasure. Thanks so much.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. You can find more stories from TaiwanPlus by following us on social media or visiting our website. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.